Yes, you're seeing me. It's Miss Francois. So, you must know this must be a very special episode, and I must really love my guests. But don't get confused, don't turn the channel or anything, you're seeing me. So welcome to the Miss Francois Show, where we have a variety of entertainment, and I use humor to help you with your dysfunctional relationships. I just had to have one special episode. As I said, I'm not fully gone, but if I see someone that intrigued me and I think they're amazing, I'm going to have them on the show. And today, we're going to have Fawn Dyer. She's a divorce attorney. We're going to get some juicy stuff today. She's an author, personal transformational coach who specializes in guiding individuals through reinvention and resilience following significant life changes. She guides from the heart with empathy, but isn't afraid to tell it like it is. Sound like a Miss Francois kind of guest to me. Hi, Fawn. How are you?
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll get you on the best show ever. You should be thankful. So with that, I just want to get into some of these questions because I'm sure we can't do all of it in 30 minutes. But one of my first thing I wanted to dive into is, before all the divorce questions, would it just not be easier if most people get a prenuptial agreement? Yes or no? Or any particular clauses? That's the first thing people should think about when thinking of getting a prenup.
They should. Everybody should have it. I think people think about prenups and only for people who are rich or have a lot of money, but that's not the case. Even if you are later in life, maybe you haven't acquired a lot of assets, you still need one. Here's why. First thing is, if wherever you live, if you're sharing expenses with that person, have a plan in the prenup as to how long maybe you want to stay in the home. If the marriage breaks down, definitely plan that out, because that's the number one issue that
So all these things you should put in the prenup.
Put it in the prenup. And then also, people know to do with alimony. They think about that, spousal support. But think about what you're going to be doing after the divorce, where you're going to live, how long you plan to live there. Maybe there's steps. I'm going to live in an apartment, then I'm going to go to this, or I'm going to live with family. But before you get to that, you might want to decide to stay in your current arrangement, even if it's a rental, having a plan.
But then some people be like, well, you're not truly in love. Like, what's the point? You may as well stay single. And a big thing is, suppose the other person don't want to do a prenup. Is that a sign to break up?
Yes.
Oh, okay. She didn't even stutter.
Yes.
Okay. So you all heard it first here. Make sure you have a prenup. Whoever you end up with, if they don't want to do a prenup, maybe that's not a person for you. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments for that one.
Yes.
But with that said, okay, let me make sure I write. I see I should supposed to have a pen here. Okay, so we see people on social media all the time. Oh my God, I get engaged. I do. Everybody's excited. But when you see all of that excitement, would you say there's a high divorce rate that follows? And do you have like statistics wise, like how much of those marriages actually last?
Well, you know, Forbes actually did a study earlier this year in 2024, and they looked at exactly that, how many marriages survive. And I think most of us think, well, more than half don't survive. But that study showed that about 43%, almost half, fail. So of first marriages, when both parties are going in, first marriages.
Okay.
And then after you get to your second or third, the number goes higher in terms of possibility of divorce.
Really? But I would think all the mistakes you've learned in the first divorce, you're much more secure, you know what you want, you're a more responsible individual. I would think the second marriage would most likely work.
You would think so. My experience, not from a statistic standpoint, just anecdotally, is that, you know, once you go through something and you're experienced and you know about it, it's easier the second time. It's like once you do something, you know, the first time, it's easier. So the pain or whatever you went through that first divorce, it's easier to start that process. First of all, you know what to expect for the most part. So it's not as daunting. And people are, I think both sides are more apt to do it the second time around or third.
Well, still, you're not making me feel any better. Basically, you're saying marriages, after the first one, you're doomed for the rest of your life. That's what I heard. And we need you in our life more. See, we keeping her paid, okay, people? So we need to do better, okay? So what is the most surprising reasons you encounter for divorces that most people would not expect?
Well, I would say what not expect. People think we talk about in relationships, the joke is that you get married and there's no sex or no intimacy after you get married. But that's not what at least in my practice for the last 13 years, that's not what I've seen be a number one reason why people are getting divorced. But I did have some cases where one comes to mind where they hadn't had any relations for like 9 years.
No.
And none at all. And then they were, upon now they're ready to have a divorce. It was kind of surprising because you don't see people coming in for the reason that we hear on social media or just amongst, communicating with everyone. We don't have divorces that are based on the idea of lack of intimacy, although that is the running joke, that once you get married, it goes down.
Goes down the drain,
Yeah.
basically. And I hear that a lot when people, remember, first the honeymoon phase, but then you have kids, you have responsibility, job. It's so much thing that takes up your time, the kids. So I can see that. But a lot of times people say, oh, it's finance or it's social media. So you say it's not any, those things play a part.
They play
but
a part.
Not as much as intimacy.
But I think what's surprising is that, to me, is that there are a few people who are actually executing a divorce because of the lack of intimacy.
Wow, that's interesting. So what I learned is just keep having lots of sex when you get married. Just make something fun and exciting, okay? Otherwise, again, you're keeping her paid, people. So
Or they having side chicks or something, I don't know.
I know I even saw something where people had a site for people who are married to cheat. It's
Yeah.
just amazing the world we live in. But what is your experience? What is the biggest misconception people have about the divorce process?
I think one thing I hear when people are starting, if they're in their first marriage and they're going through divorce, is that they think that they have to have the other person's permission to be divorced.
Yeah, because you want to be like, first, I think it's like you having conversation, maybe this not working, you think we should get a divorce, and then they're like, yeah, maybe we should, because like you're still communicating.
Yeah.
At least that's how I see it in my head.
I think it's natural to think that most states, at least I'm in New Jersey, and New Jersey, if you want a divorce, it's your right, you can get a divorce. Now, how it all works out, what you get and what happens with the children, that's a whole different scenario. But the other person can't stop you from getting a divorce. But a misconception is people come to me and it's one of the first questions they say, well, he or she, they won't give me a divorce.
So in some states, that might be different, where you would have to get the other person permission?
I don't think so. I mean, I can only speak to New Jersey.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that most people, especially if they have other countries, they come from other countries sometimes,
okay.
they have a different background and perspective, and then maybe they're here in the United States and don't understand that here, for the most part,
you could do what you want. Great. That's why America is amazing.
Yes.
Okay, so women, especially I'm talking to my girls, if you want to get a divorce, just go get a divorce. Okay, you should try to work it out first and go through all that stuff, the therapy and all that stuff. But after that, just walk out. Okay, call Miss Dyer right here. Okay, she got you, especially if you live in New Jersey. So what are some common legal mistakes people make when going through a divorce?
Not thinking about the strategy, the life strategy.
Really?
Yes. Especially if you're going to a lawyer. The lawyer is your lawyer, not your therapist. They're not your life coach.
That's true.
And
that's like in your mind, that's my best friend. They got my back. They
do a
Yeah.
legal back. They got your legal back.
I never thought of
But
it that way.
but the legal part of it doesn't necessarily always match up with the life strategy. And that's where, when I started earlier by saying you have to think about, all right, when the divorce is done, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? Like very practical decisions. And I think going into the divorce process, having that in mind as an end goal, or at least having some idea of what it looks like, will help get through the legal process, because it helps the lawyer figure out what goal are we trying to get to. Are you trying to stay in the home? Are you trying to find a new home? Are you trying to move? Are you trying to go to another state? Are you, all those types of things, which are.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned in the beginning, like sometimes they see you all as, therapist, coach, everything, and a lawyer. So how do you, like separate that? Because someone coming to you is like, oh my God, thank God I have you. You don't know what I've been going through. And it could turn into a therapy
Right.
session. So how do you separate that?
I mean, as a family lawyer, most of us who've been doing this a while, you have to be empathetic, and you do a lot of listening. And I do have to, just like this, I'll say, think about what that looks like. So it almost turns in a little bit into coaching, but I'll tell you when it stops.
Okay.
Is that the cost of it? I mean, you think about the cost.
Like, you, my friend, you charging me a lot.
So it becomes, sitting there on the phone every time, listening to all the problems is good to a point.
You know what, thinking about even money, like even going to hire someone like you, how does it differ in prices? Because if someone has little or no money, like how do you decide what you're charging someone?
So most family attorneys for divorces, and we're talking about not your situations where everybody has it all figured out,
Right.
they're just going to file some papers. But if there are things to argue over, it's mostly hourly. So the cost depends on how long you want to argue is when you really think about it that way. The more disputes and the longer there's no agreement, the more expensive your litigation costs will
Why
be.
did I decide to be a TV host? This is like only 30 minutes. I'm making no money here, okay? I'm learning something new all the time. And a lot of divorces, it comes back to, so we have things we fight in, material things, the house, finances, but then when it comes to kids,
Right.
how is
Even
that? Is
bigger,
that
more
that
high
makes
stakes,
it, you get more rich if you have
Well.
more kids? So how does that, like, I have here, like, my question was, when kids are included, when it comes to child support, like, how do you navigate those situations? And suppose one parent intentionally underreport their income when it comes to, so, oh my God.
And that's common. That's, at least it's attempted a lot. We see that a lot. But the challenge is, or how you address it, is looking at what we call discovery and requesting all of the documentation that you can get. So if you know the person, you've worked with them, and you
Right.
had you know something about them. So try to tell your attorney, here's what I know, and then try to get discovery. Might be even PI if you want to spend money. Wow. But sometimes
This
it's
is
worth
expensive.
it, depending on how much you look to get. Or sometimes it's not worth it. Just those are the cost-benefit analysis the attorney can do with you to determine, is it worth it?
Right now, I'm hearing don't get married. Just shack up with someone. Okay? Because I'm getting a headache. Like, all I
Now,
keep
if you
hearing
shack
is
up,
money.
keep your job.
Right? So,
Don't shack up and not work.
You know how it says, like, common law union? That's definitely different if you have the piece of paper compared to two people shacking up and living together. Can that any huge financial loss or anything with two people? Because I don't know if states have different
It's
laws.
very state specific on that.
Okay.
So certain states, like in New Jersey, for example, it's not going to be much to protect you if you're just living with someone.
Okay, move
from
to New
that
Jersey
standpoint.
and shack up with someone.
And keep your job. I keep saying that part.
So you have seen people, okay, they get married and they, of course, the wife decides to be a stay-at-home mom. So you're saying she should still consider, like,
I'm
at
saying
least
if
having,
you're not married and
Okay.
you're living together,
Okay,
don't quit your source of income. Don't depend on that person, the other person 100%.
But it's better if
That's
you're
risky.
married and then quit your
At least
job.
you have a
and
chance at some alimony,
get it
maybe.
back.
Maybe.
Oh, I get it.
Maybe.
Okay. And you being a lawyer, like you had mentioned to me, like you've been divorced. Were you a lawyer when you going through a divorce lawyer? When,
Yes.
oh, but you kind of have the upper hand here. You know all the laws and all these things.
Yes, but remember that, well, in my case, that person was with me for a lot of years. So, it's like you're married to a lawyer. They know a little bit too,
Right.
just
True.
naturally.
Has that, like, how long were you married, if you don't mind me asking?
Almost 15 years.
15 years, 1-5?
I have to do the math, but it's between 13 and 15 years. I can't remember exactly.
So did that do anything with how you practice as a lawyer, or like how did that affect you?
I think it helped because not that I didn't have empathy for the situation, it gave me more of that because even though I represented myself for most of the time, there was a point where I did hire someone, another attorney.
Right.
So.
And that was very helpful? Okay.
It was helpful for that portion of the case. And it gave me an opportunity, I'm on the other side of the table,
Right.
to have someone representing me and paying them and experiencing it as a, as a client.
When does alimony start? When does it stop? Can it stop?
So it depends on where you are, state to state.
Oh, okay.
So if they
So
remarry,
I gotta find someone to marry quick, and
Yeah.
then put a
So
prenup in case for that one. So oh my
so
goodness.
if there's remarriage, the other person dies. I mean, that is a factor. If they die, then that it ends. Or in some states, cohabitation, like in New Jersey, if there's cohabitation in a romantic sense with another person, that can be a ground to stop alimony payments.
Really?
Because
Okay.
if they're sharing expenses, regardless of if they're living in the same home.
Right.
You know, people have gotten really creative about how to go
Navigate.
around the system.
It's amazing. Now I see why we have private eye. It's definitely money worth spending to try
Right.
to sort certain things out. That's crazy. Going back to like kids, right? How do, back in the day, everything was, oh, you're typically going to end up with the mom, but that's not always the case. So how does someone decides like where the kids go, and how do you handle cases where parents have conflicting views on what's best for the child?
Yep. So the best interest of the child is what's going to make, that's what governs. So the court's going to look at that. That's what your attorneys and that's what the parents should be looking at. Now, everyone's not always on the
Right.
same page, but it really should be about what's the best scenario for the children. Most states now, especially New Jersey, don't do where the mother gets the priority anymore. Those
Right.
are kind of outdated perspectives. It's now, fathers are being the primary parent, caretaker
Right.
just as much. So, that's that part of it. But in terms of how do they decide, sometimes they have to get psychological evaluations, what they call a custody evaluation, which is the best interest to look at what would be best for that child or children.
And that's the
for that
kids or that's
family.
the parents
They
and the
look
kids?
at, they interview the children, they interview the parents, they may look at other third party, what we call collateral sources. So they
Really?
do an evaluation as a to assist the court in deciding. So
Really? And could the child plays a significant role if the child say I want to go with daddy?
well, I won't say they play a significant role. In some states, New Jersey one, the child has, if they're of a certain maturity and development, they can have a say, but it's only one factor. It's not the factor.
Wow.
So,
really?
the 15-year-old or 14-year-old has input, but that doesn't, just because they say that doesn't make it so. I mean, they're still children.
Right. So like how you mentioned the age 14 or 15, that plays a role according to the age
I
of the
just
child.
put that out there as an example.
Okay.
New Jersey doesn't have a specific age because you could have a child who's 15 that maybe developmentally and maturity-wise
Got you.
might be younger, but than their numerical age.
Well, I have a question about you. Like, what made you decide to want to be a lawyer?
Well, law is my second career. I was actually in finance before I became a lawyer. I was went to school at night for law
Okay.
because I was planning to move up in the corporate ranks. So
Yeah.
my goal was to be a corporate lawyer. So I ended up being a family lawyer just by happenstance, if you want to call it that, because in 2008, when I embarked on this new career,
Wow.
the world economically was going through
Right.
a lot of troubles, and I had had my first child a few years prior. So a lot of things got married, like all that happened
Yeah.
in the same time. And so I opened my own practice,
Really?
and people started coming to me for family law cases and divorces, and it
That's
just happened like
amazing.
that.
And but I love the fact that you said you had one other career, and because a lot of time people feel like they get stuck in certain careers and like this is all I know. But you're a perfect example. Anything you put your mind to, and any decision you decide to make, and plus you saying marriage, kids, and you still did it. So, girl, look, high five, high five. That's awesome. Now you should be
Yes.
very proud of yourself. That's amazing.
Thank you.
One of the things I definitely want to just like touch on is domestic violence. How does a history of domestic violence impact the divorce proceeding, if at all? I guess in terms of custody or asset division, or does it play a huge role?
For child custody, it definitely is a factor. In New Jersey, it's one of the factors, and the court will, how much weight they give to it depends on each case. But it is a significant component in terms of whether or not that parent, the one that's the offending parent,
Yeah.
if they are a danger to the children, So usually there will be some type of risk assessment that's done by a professional, a licensed clinical psychologist or whomever will do a risk assessment to see if the parent is a danger. So meaning you could still have someone who has a adjudicated domestic violence scenario against them, but they might still get parenting time with their children.
Right.
It
got
doesn't
you.
make it 100%.
Right. Like, no, you can't see my
Right.
child because,
Right.
okay, it might have.
It's fact
okay.
specific to each case.
Okay, interesting. How do you see the future of divorce law evolving, or what trends should people be aware of? Because all these things that, like before, you said mom would be the number one person, obviously. So what it might be changing? What are the trends?
I don't know what's changing.
People going to be getting divorced even more? Because I know they said during COVID.
I was going to say,
Right.
I think when the economy plays a big factor on that, and it's in my experience, you have the economy going haywire, and then a little bit later after that, not necessarily during it,
Yeah.
then people want to get divorced. There was a joke saying, soon as these mortgage rates hit a certain number, I'm out, or when they get low enough,
Right.
because it's a reality that if you're talking about separating, it's more expensive to keep two homes than it is to keep one,
Right.
two households, and especially if maybe one person makes more than the other, so
Right.
there's a burden. So some people are looking at, well, if I have to go get another house, maybe it's not a good time to buy.
Wow.
And they want to wait until they can, and they don't want to rent. I mean, remember, it goes back to my initial part of think about the end game. What is your strategy? What do you want?
Wow, I never thought of, I see a marriage could be like a definite business. Like for
It
even
is.
you with experiencing all these things and all these divorces and all you're practicing for how many years have you been in practice?
About 13, 14 years.
13. And even you experiencing divorce, how do you feel about like getting remarried or having someone else in your life? Oh Lord. You're like, what?
Right now, the answer is probably no.
Hell no, it sounds a little like.
But I will tell you, maybe 4 years ago, I probably had I was more optimistic about it and maybe looking at it. But now I'm of a place where, I'm good.
You're good.
I'm pretty good. And it's not just about divorce. It's more or less where I am in my life personally. So the more okay you are with yourself and your world and what you're doing, it's kind of, if that happens, it happens. If it doesn't,
you'll be
you're
just
still
fine.
just fine.
Nice way of looking at it. Lying. Okay. Oh, so we talked about, your experience, you doing what you do, having empathy. So let's talk about that for a second. When you talking to these people, this is so like emotional. I know, for instance, when people are like psychologists and therapists and stuff, they need to unwind. Sometimes they have their own therapists because some of these things are so heavy. So how do you deal with like the emotional challenges of the work that you do?
Well, and this comes from experience. I think most family law attorneys, when you first start out, that can be hard to balance.
Right.
But now I don't take the work home mentally. Like I don't. I'm not going to talk about the cases. I can't talk about details with anyone. But I just don't. Yeah, I leave it at work. Work is when I'm done with work. I'm taking care of my kids or doing what I need to do. And also, if you're in a office with other attorneys, that is a way to kind of, because you can talk about the case and get your frustration or whatever it is about the case. You can have that confidential conversation. But once I'm done,
that's it. You separate. That's
Yeah.
good. I guess that comes after time. And
it does.
Right, because I'm like, oh my God, I'll be going home. Girl, got you. I'm so stressed out. I can't believe this happened, so forth and so on. Plus, it could be some good gossip, even though I'm sure this stuff's supposed to be secret. You just don't mention no names. It's just this person. But like with all the stuff you're telling me, some people might hear this and be like, I don't want to get married. This is just too much. So what would you tell someone that even with all the things you've been through about marriage, is that something still people should be pursuing?
I think that they should, even though I may not be looking for that. I think that it should be. I would want that for my children if they want to be married. I don't think people should give up on it because there are some beautiful things that come out of it. You know, the marriage, even if it ended in divorce, all of it wasn't bad.
Right, true. I think we forget that. It's
All
like
of
we
it
always
wasn't-
remember
there's a
that one
reason
bad
you
thing and we
married
forget
them.
the last 14 years was happy.
Right.
We just the one thing.
Right. So there's some positive about it, and it's okay to look back at some of those good things. You know, the clients come to me, we're talking about all the terrible things, but there were some good things.
Yeah.
That were there.
And even with you being a divorce lawyer, do you ever see or have experienced or heard of people going through all this divorce and then definitely coming back together and maybe trying again? Mm-hmm. Really? That's amazing. So you have actually experienced
I've had people they were divorced, then they got married again, and then sometimes divorced again, but that's a whole nother, from the same
Really?
person. You've had lots of people who you go through the process and maybe they get to trial or it's going to go to trial and they reconcile. I've had people reconcile at the courthouse.
Shut up. Well, I guess that's easy. You just say everything right then and
Yeah.
there. Interesting. I mean, you sound like you could have like a little mini series movie because there's so many things. Sometimes you think everything is just so straight and dry, and it's not. So many different curves. So with the viewers listening, where is one thing you would leave, like from your experience? I know this is hard to like sum up in a sentence or two. From your experience in the divorce lawyer, meeting all these people, relationships, like what do you think is like one of the many things that could keep a relationship together, even though this is going to mess up your salary?
Oh, no, it's all right. I'd say it sounds cliche, but communication.
And what does communication look like?
Yeah.
Because I said what I said, I communicated.
I think it's communication in terms of, and maybe having someone to help with that so that the other person knows what your issue is and they really can understand it, because many of the issues that I find when we go to mediation but the train has left the building and they're divorcing, they sometimes just didn't really, I say I'm listening but I didn't hear you, or
Right.
however that goes. They didn't really know or understand and empathize with what
Right.
the other person is feeling.
So some empathy. Listen. So now, if you don't ever want to see Miss Fawn Dyer, try to communicate more, listen, and have some empathy, and you will never have to meet this young lady. Okay? With that says, Miss Fawn Dyer, tell the people where they can reach you, where they can contact you, where they can see you.
Yep.
So this is your time to shine.
Yes, thank you. I can be found on all social media at I am Fawn Dyer. And on there, you find my link. I'm in New Jersey. I handle cases all throughout New Jersey. And if you're in New York, we've got people in my office that handle New York as well. So
Awesome.
I am Fawn Dyer.
So don't worry, guys. I love you guys. So I'm going to make sure I put that in the handle at the bottom so you could definitely reach out. With that said, and thank you for joining me on this special episode. Now, because I know you all, I've always wanted to have a divorce lawyer on, so I was really excited that we were able to connect. So definitely check her, look her up. Okay, if some of you are like, yeah, writing that down. But definitely check out your host, Miss Francois, on all social media, or just my website. And hopefully you all don't see me anytime soon. Okay? Have a wonderful evening. Remember, Miss Francois always saying exactly what you're thinking.